I am taking my Steam Deck to Japan, and that means we're gonna see just how well this thing can hold up as a travel companion. We're talking 13-hour flights, limited internet, and the size of the damn thing. And if you like the vibe of this video, then definitely check out my Odin Light review, which I just did, where I took the Odin Light on a road trip from Boston to Philadelphia. And another reason you might want to get subscribed is because the next review I do is going to be Sekiro Shadows Done Twice, played entirely on the Steam Deck. And there's going to be a dedicated section committed just as like a follow-up to this video on exactly how well the Steam Deck has lasted as a long-term companion and not just a travel companion. But with that all out of the way, I got a flight to catch, so I'm gonna go.
And before I even get on the first plane for my long journey, we can talk about the first road bump with the Steam Deck. So I'm nowhere near Japan yet. I am still in Boston. But one thing that I have noticed, if you're playing on your Steam Deck, is the offline mode. You will be encountering some problems that you wouldn't encounter with a Nintendo Switch pretty much immediately and persistently while you're traveling in situations where the internet is not guaranteed, like on a plane. Nintendo has set the gold standard for playing games on the go. For the most part, you don't need to worry about having an internet connection to play single-player games. Valve and the Steam Store haven't really had to consider this issue until the Steam Deck. Most people playing games are on desktop or laptop, and while we moan and groan about DRM, more often than not the issue comes down to the servers being down or overloaded, and not the client sitting on a plane causing the game to be locked out. Well, with the Steam Deck, it is very possible you will find yourself without an internet connection, and many games have DRM or require an internet connection for one reason or another, especially the first time you launch the game. So it's often not enough to just download the games you want at home and then go. First, download the games, then launch the games with an internet connection. And finally, make sure you set your Steam Deck to offline mode while you have an internet connection. Or you may find yourself disappointed before getting on that plane to find yourself arbitrarily locked out of single-player games. But with a little extra planning, you'll find yourself playing Sekiro Shadows Die Twice over a world of snow and ice on your way to Japan. Probably the only one on the plane doing so. And the relatively modest power brick, even without a flippable plug or removable cable, and the handheld nature make using the Steam Deck on a plane much more tenable solution than a gaming laptop. But even the Steam Deck seems to push comfort limits in terms of the size of the device on the plane. However, the ergonomics sure do beat a Nintendo Switch. And you better pray that you have more than just USB power on your flight, because if you do want to play a game like Sekiro, expect dismal battery life. Playing at mostly low, targeting 60 frames per second, Sekiro will net you about 1.5 hours of battery, not even close to satisfying your 13.5 hour flight time. The silver lining is you have control of the settings and can squeeze more time out of your deck with resolution setting and frame rate tweaking, but keep your expectations in check. And finally, landing in Tokyo, I can catch a train to Osaka, experience some local cuisine, and take in some city sights.
It's pretty impressive, huh? I'm at the Osaka observation deck, and there's no question that what you're looking at behind me is in fact extremely impressive. Kind of begs the question though, is Steam Deck's performance actually that impressive?
I think we should start by talking about compatibility first. Simply put, the Steam Deck will not be able to play all the games you could play on Windows. This comes down to two situations: Proton compatibility and anti-cheat. Proton, the compatibility layer which allows the Steam Deck, which is running Linux, to play Windows executables, is steadily improving, which can be a bit of a blessing and a curse. The blessing is obviously that your compatibility improves over time. I say curse, however, because the fluid nature of Proton means that I've found some games which previously worked to suddenly have stopped working despite being Steam verified titles. And Proton straight up will not work with all of your games. But I don't expect every single game to work. Every platform you buy into has software limitations at one point or another. Anti-cheat is the bigger issue for me personally. As it stands, the majority of competitive multiplayer games will not work on the Steam Deck. And this is a big deal for me because I plan to use my Steam Deck as a way to stay connected with my friends when traveling and continuing to play single-player games on the road. But most multiplayer content being unsupported, that could be a deal breaker for a lot of people that I thought I would call out. So once you do get a game to run, how well can you expect it to run? Well, the good news is relatively modern AAA titles I have tried have run well enough. Sometimes the low settings can't quite be fully hidden by the small screen size though, and for some games you're just going to have to accept that 60 frames per second is not on the table. But the rapid growth of image upscaling techniques, continued Proton innovation, and driver optimization gives me hope that the Steam Deck will pull its weight for a few years to come. I do think docking this to anything larger than a small monitor may show too many blemishes, but more on docking later. There is a bit of an elephant in the room I would like to address. I've been mentioning compatibility issues, anti-cheat issues, and impressive yet modest performance. Would it be better to just pick up a laptop for about $500? Windows Laptop would eliminate compatibility issues, especially with multiplayer titles. Performance would still be modest, maybe even a bit weaker than on deck, but ultimately you'd have a larger library once you factor in the multiplayer titles. Plus, it's a full-blown computer. You can edit videos, send emails, watch videos, and more. But isn't the Steam Deck also a full-blown computer?
So I'm in Kyoto, and I'm trying to figure out where I want to go eat, figure out what my night plans are. Of course, I have plans for during the day, but you don't plan everything when you're making an itinerary. That's no fun. So I thought I could, use this full computer to help do things like that. Maybe not quite as good as a phone, but how does the Steam Deck hold up as, let's call it a laptop replacement, and how does the full desktop experience hold up?
Just as a bit of background, I consider myself fairly comfortable with Linux. I daily drove it for 6 months, I used it daily for 5 years, and I still use it frequently apart from on the Steam Deck to this day. And in my last video, the Odin Light road trip review, I noted just how convenient it was to have a secondary device with a full-featured OS, unlike something like the Nintendo Switch. So I had high hopes for the Steam Deck, a full computer, maybe even a complete laptop replacement. And well, that just didn't pan out. In Japan, I quickly completely gave up on the deck and just used my phone. The keyboard is garbage. The controls are not optimized for desktop mode, and the desktop mode in general is not touch-friendly. It's a desktop OS after all, so just dock it and hook it up to a few accessories and you're good to go, right? Well, Valve does have its own docking station for an eye-watering $90, and other solutions can be complete hit or miss, with many docks just simply not working at all. Once you are rocking and rolling, you'll find you can choke the system pretty quickly. Sluggish and laggy, it works in a pinch, but it was not exactly impressive for me. And as far as traditional software like video editors, word processors, and other productivity tools, well, they exist, but I would expect most people will not be able to fully translate their workflow seamlessly over to the Steam Deck. I certainly was not. Not to mention, if you are not comfortable with Linux things like the command line, it may become a little uncomfortable fairly quickly. Even console and PC features that are commonplace, like being able to capture gameplay footage, is absent by default on the deck. And this loops back to the laptop argument. Should you just buy a $500 laptop? It'll have a better trackpad, it'll have a physical keyboard, better software availability, and will be able to play some, most, maybe even more games than the Steam Deck can. And once you get the Steam Deck in its carrying case that Valve provides, the volume of the device comes pretty darn close to a laptop, if not exceeding smaller laptops. I think this is the best way to summarize. With a laptop, you'll realistically need to bring a mouse or controller along to play most games. The exact opposite is true of the Steam Deck. With the Steam Deck, if you want to do something productive, you'll realistically need to bring a keyboard, dock, or other dongle along to make productivity a reality on this thing. And I know I've been sounding pretty doom and gloom, so let's pivot a bit. Catching a train from Kyoto to Tokyo does remind me that you can play AAA games on a plane, on a train, a bus, wherever. When it comes to gaming, this thing is a premium controller attached to a device that simply gets the job done. And moving to Akihabara, we can see where the Steam Deck really shines. I am in Akihabara, Tokyo's tech capital and one of retro gaming's tech capitals of the world. So here's a good time for me to tell you that the Steam Deck is an absolute monster at emulation. And in fact, there's a good chance it can play almost every single game behind me for city blocks and blocks and blocks on something a little bit bigger than a Nintendo Switch. I used EmuDeck to set up my Steam Deck for emulation, and it was probably the simplest all-encompassing emulation setups I've ever done on any device. And this thing is, simply put, the portable emulation king. All the way up to even some Nintendo Switch titles, the Steam Deck really impresses. There's plenty of headroom to get high resolution, high frame rates, and even really solid battery while emulating on the Steam Deck. It's much bigger than the Odin Lite I just reviewed, but compatibility, performance, and game-to-game tinkering are basically non-existent on the Steam Deck. And I think that's where the Steam Deck is really settling into its niche. Playing bleeding-edge games and competitive multiplayer can put a magnifying glass on the deck's blemishes. But playing pretty much anything PS4/Xbox One and older helps the battery life, allows for higher resolutions and higher frame rates, while reducing the risk of compatibility issues. And since we're in Akihabara, I think it's a good time to mention the repairability of this device. It handily beats any laptop or portable gaming device I have ever owned, and 2 thumbs way up for that. So in conclusion, honestly, the Steam Deck is a harder sell than I thought it would be, and fits a smaller niche than I had originally thought. Don't get me wrong, it's a super cool piece of kit with a market going forward, but I see the Steam Deck in one of 2 lights. You can either think of it as a really cheap entry into PC gaming with a lot of compromises, from game compatibility to performance and essentials like screen capture currently being absent, or you can think of it as a fairly expensive companion to an already existing PC or setup. And I think the compromises really start to add up fast. While not being as big as a laptop outside the case, gets pretty darn close inside the case, and the Switch and Odin can't play PC games, but they definitely provide a lot of really big, satisfying games with better battery and a much more manageable footprint. And oftentimes, non-gaming laptops with integrated GPUs can play games at low settings, 720p, with no compatibility restrictions, and all of the added benefits of doing other computer stuff with the comfort of a built-in keyboard and larger screen. So, next time I travel internationally, I'm probably gonna leave the Steam Deck at home. But since coming home and before going on the trip, I really enjoyed using my deck at home. Grinding out a hard boss or a tough level in bed or on the couch can be really nice. And that is the niche where the Steam Deck can even outshine a laptop. If you want to play single player games on the couch or in bed with power nearby, you'll love the Steam Deck. But for just about everything else, maybe consider a laptop with an iGPU, or put your money towards a gaming laptop or custom desktop depending on your portability needs.